Okay, so just a slight shift of topic where you're talking about AI in the previous presentation. But today, I would like to share about what Bitcoin is. Most of you, or many of you, might have heard the prices have been really high. But really, more importantly, why you should care about Bitcoin beyond its price, right? Is it just a speculative assets, or is there something else to it? So that's what we want to talk about today. And a little bit about my background. My day job is at Adobe, but one of my personal interests is kind of contributing to Bitcoin. I used to be a lecturer at UC Berkeley, and I also had the honor to contribute to the source code of the Bitcoin Core software. It's open source on GitHub. But I don't know everything about Bitcoin. However, I want to share with you what I do know, and hopefully you'll find it interesting and start learning more about it. Um, so many of you must have heard about many kind of misconceptions about Bitcoin, such as it is a speculative asset, it's only used by bad people, right? And it has no real world value, it's purely for investing. Um, but this is purely not true. So as of today, there's about 1.4 billion adults around the world that lack access to traditional banking services. And Bitcoin actually offers, many other cryptocurrencies actually offer alternative access to banking. And for those who don't have a bank account, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies still allow people to send transactions easily. So in this talk, we'll specifically look at the three powers of Bitcoin, how it provides financial access, how it enables cross-border payments for remittances, as well as how it can be an alternative store of value. But before we dive in, you might have noticed that I've been talking about Bitcoin as if it is separate from other cryptocurrencies. And I just want to address why I'm specifically talking about just Bitcoin today. It is the original cryptocurrency, right? It introduced the concept of a blockchain back in 2009. And it's also the largest cryptocurrency by market cap, about 1.9 trillion, which is 4.4 times larger than the second coin, which is Ethereum. But beyond these numbers, what I think is really special about Bitcoin is that it is truly decentralized. So the idea about Bitcoin was introduced by an anonymous entity called Satoshi Nakamoto, who basically just dropped this white paper on the internet and remained anonymous and kind of disappeared after a while. So in this cryptocurrency network in Bitcoin, there's really no key influencers or like leaders who might influence the decision of the network. So a lot of the decisions about the developments are actually made more democratically amongst the core developers of Bitcoin, who are you and me, who just want to spend free time going on GitHub, downloading source code and contributing. So it's truly decentralized. And another reason is that it has the network effect. As more and more individuals and businesses are now adopting Bitcoin, it is more accepted as a medium of exchange and a store of value, right? So the more people are using a form of payment as a currency, the more that currency gains value. So I'm definitely biased. I would say it is something that I will focus on in this talk, but a lot of the use cases are not just limited to Bitcoin because a lot of cryptocurrencies kind of take inspiration from it and can fulfill similar promises, but maybe not at the same scale. All right, so I'm gonna dive in. We're gonna look at what it is, how does it work, how it can improve financial inclusion, and what are some caveats, what are some potential barriers to adoption. Like we said, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer digital currency that's not controlled by any centralized authority. But this idea of like having kind of decentralized currency is actually not new. So Bitcoin's kind of mechanism can be analogous to this form of traditional currency used by the Yapese people on the island of Yap Micronesia, which is in the Southeast Pacific. So this kind of ancient currency has a lot of similarity with Bitcoin. Um, and basically, the Yapese people, they utilize these large limestones that are called rice stones as currencies. So these are very heavy. These stones could be taller than a human, right? But the way that they establish ownership is that the whole community will come together and everyone in the community has an understanding of who owns what, right? So if I claim that I own this largest stone out here, but you guys are in my community and you all have the knowledge that that's simply not true, then you will be able to call me out and say I'm lying. But you can notice that there's no really one authoritative figure that is able to keep record of the transactions or the ownership. Everyone gets to play that role. Everyone is a historian of who owns what. So this eliminates a lot of inefficiency that's introduced by a centralized party. This eliminates corruption because everything's very transparent. And ownership of these are all established through community consensus as well as the oral records. Now, this is like glossing over a lot of the technical details of Bitcoin, but this is not the purpose of this talk. I just want to give you an idea of how it works kind of in spirit, but just note that this is like more of like analogy rather than the actual accurate representation. But if we can compare the ancient rice stones as currency and Bitcoin side by side, you will see that the representation value, right, for the Yapese people is a rice stone. On Bitcoin, we just have these like invisible, like virtual coins that the technical term is UTXO. And in the Yapese community, ownership is established by community acknowledgement. And similarly, on the Bitcoin network, every participant, or you can call the node, keeps a record of the blockchain, the transaction history. So everyone kind of plays the role of being a historian. And whenever there is a transaction going on, let's say I want to pay NG certain amount of money, I'm not going to physically carry the coin, right? Or the stone. That's a lot. But instead, what happens like I will tell everyone that the ownership of a stone is now transferred, and everyone in the community agree and update their records. And it's similar to how Bitcoin also operates. And then when there's a transaction, right, it will be broadcast for the network, so everyone will update their ledger, and there's no centralized party needed to keep track of who owns what. So we can see that there are some properties that we've mentioned, right? The network is peer-to-peer and it's decentralized. But what it also means is that this network is permissionless. It allows anyone to participate. And it's also borderless, right? So if you're based in South Africa and you want to send $5 to someone in the United States, you can use the same network without having to go through a lengthy process. And these are really important properties that really enable us to grant more financial access to the underserved areas of the world. So like we said, 1.4 billion adults remain unbanked as of 2021. And if you look at some of the reasons for being unbanked, right, it could be simply just lack of funds to be able to put in a bank account. But also another reason that is frequently cited is the financial services are too expensive. It is costly to open and maintain a bank account, and many people simply cannot afford that. And the third reason that is also popular is the distance. Banks tend to be open in areas where is more urban and they can have a more profitable customer basis. So that leaves many of the urban areas, even though they're densely populated, but those areas tend to be underserved and people could not physically go to a branch of a bank. And then we live in the United States, so this is kind of something hard to imagine, right? But what does it mean to be unbanked, right? It means like you cannot really put your savings anywhere in an account. Everything has to be done in cash. And if you live in an inflationary economy like Venezuela, where every day your wealth is depreciating by several percentages, right? Then over time, you will have to start to carry a large bag of cash just to go to grocery shopping. So it is also very easy to susceptible to theft, right? So there are many downsides of not having a bank account. And in worlds such as Morocco, countries such as Morocco, the unbanked population as of 2021 is actually reaches 71% of the overall population. So that's seven people for every 10 people in Morocco, some of them do not have a bank account. Um, and one of the struggle of not having a bank account is also linked to the lack of any vehicle or ways to be able to send money, especially if you are a migrant worker, you want to send money back home, right? It makes it really difficult for you to do that. So this is one of the ways that Bitcoin can be helpful here, or other cryptocurrencies as well work similarly, where it facilitates cross-border payments and make sure it's cost effective and timely. So for many migrant workers, they send a sum of money back home and as a gift for their family, and that is called remittance. Remittance can be a lifeline for many, many families. And in 2022, migrant workers sent over $680 billion to low and middle income countries. However, there are problems with the remittance services they have to use. It is costly. Traditional remittance services usually cost about 6.3%. And that's a lot of money for low-income individuals. The transfer of funds also can take up to 10 days to process. And again, lastly, there's also limited availability of banking services, so making it physically hard to even send the money. And where cryptos and Bitcoin can really help is to simplify this whole process. Because with traditional banking process, users will have to go through multiple hoops, right? You have to send money from your bank, which pass through many intermediaries, third parties, and then it reaches the bank of the recipient. So each of these steps will add delays and fees. But because the blockchain network is purely peer-to-peer and decentralized, it allows you to directly send money to the recipient, and your money will be received within minutes, and the fees are usually very low, just a fraction of the traditional services. So in Mexico, we've seen an uptake in crypto adoption. They actually processed over 4.3 billion remittances in cryptocurrencies in 2023. So that's about 5% of the total remittance market. So there's actually a lot of real world usage of cryptocurrencies. Last but not least, I want to talk about how Bitcoin can also serve as an alternative store of value, right? So inflation is something we hear in the news, but it actually is very impactful for many people living in countries with hyperinflation. So for example, in Venezuela, in 2023, the inflation rate is about 360%. And some other countries, such as Argentina, Turkey, we heard a lot about them. And what inflation does is really erodes purchasing power for people, and people's savings become less and less valuable over time, right? So where Bitcoin is different is that there's no centralized party to manipulate the money supply. You simply cannot print Bitcoin out of thin air. So the supply is always capped at a certain amount, 21 million, and it's decentralized, right? So again, no one can make decision about the network. And it's also transparent, right? Anything that happens on the network can be audited and seen by all of the participants. And so this is a reason many people in El Salvador turn to Bitcoin to store their wealth. to hedge against the inflation. Nothing is perfect though, and I don't think Bitcoin is also a perfect solution today. So I do want to talk about in the next few minutes the barriers to adoption, right? So unfortunately, you still need internet to access the blockchain network. But for many places that where there's a high percentage of unbanked population, internet access is also an obstacle. Another barrier is that there's a problem with the digital literacy. Not a lot of people really understand how cryptocurrencies work, how to protect their private keys, their funds. So it really still takes a lot of effort for us to educate and provide a great user experience for everyone to be able to take advantage of it. And lastly, the price volatility is real, right? So if you put your money in Bitcoin as a store of value and it quickly depreciates because of some catastrophic news, even though they bounce back up later on, perhaps, it is still not preferred by many people simply because of the volatility. So I hope this is a balanced representation of kind of what Bitcoin can do, but also with keeping in mind some of the caveats. But I hope that this is informative for everyone. And if you want to learn more, there are some resources where you can educate yourself. But thank you so much for your attention. I will quickly address some questions. It's not easy to access or even to remember your current cryptocurrencies. The current biggest cryptocurrency holders are in big countries such as US or China. How can you forecast this currency can actually benefit low-income people? So there's actually a significant population using Bitcoin in the more low-income countries. So Nigeria, for example, has like 32% of the population has owned Bitcoin. Similarly, for I think Vietnam's actually topped the chart in terms of cryptocurrency ownership. But yes, I think the use case for owning crypto is totally different, right? I think for people living in more developed countries, more for an assets for investment, but you will see that other folks actually use it more for day-to-day transaction and be able to send money back home with cryptocurrencies. How do you evaluate, protect yourself from Bitcoin scams? Your playbook or other guidelines to follow? Yeah, that's a really good question. So these sources that I provided, I've personally vetted, and most of the Bitcoiners that I've talked to, we also kind of utilize them. But you will notice that they really don't encourage you to jump into some sort of assets. It's more like just for educational purposes. And then I think another really red flag that I look at is if some project says, hey, you should invest today and it will guarantee to 10x your return. But when you look at the asset itself, it doesn't really have this real world value. And it's not really being used. Then I would question its legitimacy. But there are so many products being developed, so I can't really speak specifically. But obviously, this talk is also not investment advice. I'm not saying like anyone should just purchase any type of currencies.